Mai te whiwhia, mai te rawea, mai te tawhiti. Hara mai nā e koe whakatupu anu, koe whakatupu aragi. Tā kia bai ki rewa ki te whai au, ki te abaraba, haubi e, hui e. Pēwhera te mihi, ki arangi e tua ke nei a papai horora. Pēwhera o noho ki te mihi. Ara, ki a ngā wai hono i te pō, potatau te whero, te tuawaru. Taino ati ki te whare o tara pipipi, pai marire ki a rātou. Ka rere ati nā whakaro ki a rātou ko whitirangi tia ka tika, nā mate huhu o te wā. Engari, tuku atu rātou ki a rere, tuku atu rātou ki a whakatā. Anei anō hoki te kaupapa, mo te ahiahi nei nō reira nā mātā waka i tau mai, tēnā koutou, nau mai whakatau mai. Tāku ati te kite nā kanohi o te arawa waka e hau mai nei, hoki mai nā whakaro ki a Ngāti Oho Mairangi, i mua i te wehe te tainga mai o nā waka e rua. Nō reira, whakatau mai roto i tērā o nā ahuatanga, wainganui a tātou tainui waka me te arawa waka. Anei no hoki te mihi me ki tō tātou whetu o te wā, ki a koe te tuahine e Sandy. Me pēhera nā kōrero o eke ngā taumata, te mātauranga, whai ana tērā o tō tātou rangatira me ki a tāwhaki, ko koe tērā. Anei ka puta atu e koe o Pearls of Wisdom hāharane, kia rongo a te maria, engari tāku ati ki a koe te tuahine, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi, tēnā te mihi. Hoi no, e hari te mea hara mai koutou te whakarongo ki au, engari ko tāku hei mihi whakatau. Hei mihi, hei pōwhiri hia me ki hei kanohi, mo te ahi kāro o te whare wānanga nei, a Ngāti Haua, Ngāti Wairere. Anei hoki mātou te mana whenua a tamunu pō, a Ngāti Mahanga, Ngāti Koro ki kahu kuru e tu ake nei, e mihi kauana, e mihi kauana, e mihi kauana. Nō reira ku rangatira, tēnei tāku, hei whakapuare he tō tātou hui, ana ka tuku atu e karakia no mo te tātou pai mari, hei whakapuare hea, katahi, ka tuku atu te rākau i aiki a Sandy ki tana onko, e kōro ana, ana mataya, tana onko. Engari, tika hoki pai. Engari, hei whakahoki kōrero, ka tira, ka tuku atu te rākau anō hoki, ki tō tātou tumuaki me ki te ahorangi, a Neil Quigley nō reira. Tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi. Nō reira, ko te karakia ki te atua mana tātou e manaki, e tiaki, pai marire. Tō tiakitanga maramatanga ki tō tātou koe nei te kāhui ariki, me ngā tinanai mai tinei mō mātou katoa e te pōnei, e nā te kroria. Pai mairi. Kia ora tātou.
Te muri ahia hi kei runga i a tātou. Kia kākahuria e ia, taupiriku o te takotoranga o te ihi, o te wehi, o te mana, o te tapu. Kia tau hoki, te tau whirotanga ata whai ki runga, ki te kuini Māori, ki te ariki nui, kuini ngā waihono i te pō. E arahi nei, i tana iwi ki ngā rauna o te paukai, e arahi nei, i tōna iwi, ki te taumata tike o te kotahitanga, e arahi nei, i tōna iwi ki te tahi anamata, i wawata tiara e tana pāpā, hei kona i tangi ake ai ki aia, kia kingi tū heitia pōta tau te wherowhero, te tuawhitu. Te ika nui o te wā. He oi anō, tana haerenga, anō he rā ngai ika. Hei reira o nā mate, roto te whakatoa hea, kei taku pāpā te kāhautu. Ngā mate o roto i a mātai, te wāhi ki a bomb gillies, te wāhi ki te tairāwhiti iri tana, tariana tūria. E uaua te whakahua i a rātai katoa, koi wareware he ingoa, engari te pūkahu o te tangata, ka ngaro i te tirohanga kanohi. Haere koutou, haere koutou, haere koutou. Kia huri pēnei noa mai ki a tātou ki te hunga ora ki te whai au ki te ao māramati hei mauri ora. Ka kia tēnei he whakahihi, ngare mihi ake anau ki taku kuraua, ki a rore, e whakai ana ki a tū tēnei tamaiti, i te whakahoki i ngā mihi, ki a kraiti ana i tēnei rangi nei, e koro tēnā koe. Ai taku pāpā, kraiti ana. Ko te wā e kaha ki te ai tāua i a tāua ko ngā whakataitai waka mai karapiroke. He oi anō mai tērā wārā tatu mai rā ki tēnei wā, e tino rongo ana hau i te kauawhitia ōku o taku whānau, e koe aha kua mātou haere ai kihea, i te rohe nei o te rohe pōtai. Nō reira koe e mihi mai nei ki a mātou, kia pēnei noa ki te ki, mihi mai ki te uri o Ngāti Maniapoto. Mihi mai rā ki te uri o Ngāti Whakaue. Mihi mai ki te uri o Ngāti Rārua. E noho ana hei whetū kōreko mō tātou i tēnei rangini. Ko te whetū o tēnei pō e harai a te muera ko Sandy Kei. Te wahine nei. Nō roto i ngā mahinga o te ao tukupū i whānau mai ai ia. Ka tūtaki a te muera kia kahu tāpeka. Ka puta ki waho ko te whare pōrera. Ka noho a roimata i a hare rore. Ka puta ki waho ko roimata. Tō rāua piringa, ka puta tētahi wahine. Māna e whakapakeke e tahi tamariki tokotoru. Māna e whāngai te tokotoru nei ki te mātauranga. Māna e manaki me tana kotahi i te tokotoru nei ki te whai ki te takahi i te ara o te mātauranga. Ka kia hau he whakahihi mo te whakahua i tana ingoa, engari me whakahihi au i tēnei pō. Tōna ingoa ko Sandra Lee, Roy Mata Morrison. Nōku tēnei māma. Ko nei hoki te māma o Tālei Morrison. Me whakapuaki e au tana ingoa, nā te mea, me he mea ia i konei, kua rite te nui o te paki o tana ngākau ki tōku i tēnei rākua ki tana māma ki tēnei karangatanga. Me te aha, hei tēnei wā hoki mahara ia hau ki tana taina, ki a taini. Hoki mahara ia hau ki ana whaia keke, ki ana matua keke, ki ana kuia me ana koroua. Ākua kāore tātou i te kite a whatu i a rātou i tēnei ahiahi kei konei rātou. Hei konei rātou nā te mea e hari kua ana rātou i whai tā rātou mokopuna i te ara o te mātauranga. Kia mōhio mai gautu. Tō mātou whānau, he whānau kapahaka. Koe nei ana ke pea, te mea i roto i te whānau kapahaka, kaori rata ki te kapahaka. Kei te mamai tonu i roto i tana ngākau, tētahi rā i whānako ai ia i tētahi pukapuka, i te whata pukapuka o tana matua keke o Howard. Mai tērā wā i tino mōhio ai ia, ka noho ko te mātauranga tana kai i te ao i te pō. Nō reira, kei taku māma. Te take i mataia ai ahau. Nō te rā. Ko te rā tēnei, e hara i te mea, hei whakanui mā mātou i o heke ngā werawera, ngari hei whakanui mā tō pā i tō hirahira. Anei ngā heke ngā werawera, anei ngā kaitiaki i au tamariki i te wā o te uaua. Anei o hoa haere i te ara o te mātauranga. Anei ngā taokete, anei ngā mokopuna, o tuakana, o taina, me ngā ihu manea. Kei konei anō hoki, te tumuaki o tō whare wānanga. Māwe ki mai, heha tētahi tohu rangatira i tu atu i tērā. Heoi anō, ka hoki noa ke kia koe kei te pāpā Kraitiana. E whakatau mai nei te tini, te mano. Whakatau mai nei ngā ihi, ngā wehi, ngā mana, ngā tapu. Ki roto ki tō tātou piri ngā whare, te whare wānanga o Waikato. A koe i whānako i taku māma, i taku oranga katoa. Tēnā koe, tēnā koe, tēnā koe, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. O taku kai waiata, o taku Auntie Puntsi. Nā pera napia, he kōnui, he kōroa iwa.
Carrying your tata katoa. What do I say? Nothing. Just sing. Just sing. E kuima, e koroma, kaua heiri mai, nā koutou, e nei mahi e, I nā wā o mua. Haere, haere hine, hoki ki tō iwi. Wai ho au I muri nei, tangi hotu ai. Nā tō atahua, tau ai piri ai. Nā te aroha e hine, nā te aroha e hine.
Kia ora, Auntie.
Te rangi e tū nei, te papa e te koutou nei, te whare ariki o po tātou te wherewheru. Pai māriri. E koroma, e kuima, e rau rangatira mā, huri noa e te whare. Tēnā koutou, tēnā hui tātou katoa. This evening we gather to celebrate the academic journey of our distinguished colleague, Professor Sandy Morrison, an interdisciplinary scholar whose work spans Māori, Pacific and Indigenous studies, mātauranga Māori, adult education, te tiriti o waitangi, and sustainable development, including climate change. Sandy has a Bachelor of Arts degree with a Paitahi specialisation and a Masters of Māori and Pacific Development, gained while working part-time at this university as a student counsellor, as a community educator for the Centre for Continuing Education, and later as an academic in the then School of Māori and Pacific Development. In the late 1990s, she was elected as a representative to the South Pacific for the Asia Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education. She served as president of that association from 2004 to 2008 and was inducted into the International Adult and Community Education Hall of Fame by the University of Oklahoma in 2009, the first New Zealander and the first Indigenous person to be appointed. 2015, she was elected President of the International Council of Adult Education and used that platform to advocate for the inclusion of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous knowledges in the Sustainable Development Goals. Professor Morrison has also been recognised with Sustained Excellence Awards for tertiary teaching in adult and community education. As the Vision Mātauranga lead for the Deep South National Science Challenge, Professor Morrison oversaw a number of Vision Mātauranga projects which investigated climate change impacts and opportunities for iwi, hapu, whānau and Māori business. Together, the largest ever Māori-led research effort into the implications of changing climate conditions for Māori society. She's also a member of the steering group and Kahui Māori lead for the Antarctic Science Platform, leading the inclusion of Mātauranga Māori into the platform and into science programs. Sandy sits on the Science Committee of the World Adaptation Science Programme, works with the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, and was a contributing author to the Tangata Whenua New Zealand Māori report of the 6th assessment report of the IPCC. Closer to home, there are two highlights of Professor Morrison's career. First, working with her uncle, Sir Howard Morrison, in 2006 to write and deliver his speech for the annual Waitangi Rua Rau Tau lecture, which looks forward to the Waitangi bicentenary in 2040. And second, bringing her knowledge, skills and experience to bear in supporting her whānau and uncle, Rory Stafford, who is leading the Nelson 10th case, a long-running property law case attempting to hold the Crown accountable for the systemic erosion of whenua, culture and autonomy, and to compensate them for the losses caused by the Crown's breach of its legal duties. Nō reira, ka te huri atu ki a koe e te ahurangi Sandy. Ka tahi rā te pātai nui kua toko aki nei hei whiriwhiri mā tātou i tēnei pō. Kei hea te kāinga tūturu. E te marekura, e te hoa, ki a koe te wā. Nau maharama.
E toku kāinga, e toku pā, kei te tū ohu ahau kia koutou. Tēnā koe karaiti ana i tūwhera te huarahi ki te rongarawa anō nei ngā mihi. Kua whāreki hia ngā kōrero katoa, nō reira kaore he kōrero atu i te mihi, ki te āriki nui, kuini ngā waihona o te pō, pai marere kia tātou katoa. I want to acknowledge the ancestral houses from which I descend. As we've already heard, they are based in the respective rohe of Ngāti Rārua, Ngāti Whakaue, Ngāti Manioputo. And I acknowledge the houses of wisdom which continue to generate that knowledge that guides our behaviours today. I also want to acknowledge in appreciation the gifts that grace the stage, the kaloa, the ngatu, symbols of cultural strength, symbols of cultural continuity, symbols of the essence and creativity of women, each with their own story, each with their own song. Ki tōku kāinga no tunga anō nei ngā mihi. I want to frame my kōrero with these two proverbs. When I talk about kāinga, as I will develop later in my kōrero, these two resonate very, very strongly with me, and I'll unravel them. Hoki atu ki te kāinga, return to the winds of your home so that you may be cleansed. Speaks to oneness, speaks to spirituality, speaks to land and people, speaks to the gods again. He kākanoa hau, I rui a mai I rangi ātia. We are all seeds that were planted from rangi ātia. And those seeds can be a number of things. Seeds of knowledge, seeds of people, seeds of place, seeds of innovation and technology that we don't even know yet. They're still our seeds. The important thing in that seed, it has an essence of a homeland. That homeland that we acknowledge as the original home for Māori. And I take this a little bit further with the concept of kāinga to make real some of the scholarship that I've been involved in. And this is more scholarship from my recent past. Diverse as this scholarship is, and this is just some of it, the common socio-cultural framework that I like to reference and bring real life situations to is this concept of kāinga, and I'll talk more to that. Some of you may see yourselves in these pictures. Te Tai Okarapia, the Antarctica work, absolutely new and innovative work. Long been the field of scientists of European descent, and part of the mandate that I have as to what does mātauranga Māori look like in this place. How does one create place, create a pā, or create a kāinga when there's been no long human habitation? How do you place make? How do you create that sense of belonging? It's one of the research trajectories that I'm really interested in unpacking. The middle picture is some years ago, and this sparked the reason for my interest in labour mobility. It's of the Migrant Women's Centre in Manila, and at that time the coordinator with the blue top was taking a number of calls, all internationally, negotiating exploitation, negotiating wages, negotiating abuse. And just being in that presence and watching this all happen brought to mind, will we ever have this in Aotearoa, New Zealand? We certainly have schemes that we say have triple wins, and that's in the recognised seasonal scheme. And I drop your vision down to the picture on your bottom left. That's another trajectory of work where we were able, as a research team, to be able to follow this connection between the RSC workers and kono horticulture of Waikato for 10 years to get a good sense of what were some of those successful tenets of a good mobility scheme. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Pacific climate mobility, which is in your lower centre frame. Other work currently underway is with colleagues, is Te Tiriti base, looking at sustainable citizenship for ethnic communities guided by Te Tiriti or Waitangi framework. Then another more challenging Marsden-funded project is the Sustainable Wellbeing, where our research team will be bringing together Te Ao Māori concepts as well as economic models to bring and emerge and develop and create a type of economic model that analyses and can quantify intergenerational well-being. Looking forward to seeing what all of that means. But that's what happens, right? When you research, you think, what is all of this about? And just when the project finishes, you get it. No, not quite. You're actually developing your ideas all the time, okay? Because that's what we do as scholars in our scholarly life. So this concept of kāinga, how does one explain kāinga? Well, when we look at the words literally, it can mean fire, food, talking about the sustenance of humankind, of the human collective. It's both a physical and a spiritual framework. It's a lovely word, actually, the more that you say it. We all belong to kāinga. We all belong to pā, and so there's a social interdependency in these social constructs and cultural constructs that we use. I like the way that a colleague and a scholar, Professor Va'ai, talks about relationality is the essence of kāinga. Relationality encompassing spirituality. And I refer back to the proverb, hoki atu ki te kāinga kia pūria nei. That essence of spirituality, that connection to spirituality, the essence with the land, that essence of oneness. In Pacific communities, this is held together by a term that they call the wā, the space that connects. Māori have a similar term, we call it the wā, only it's become probably more concrete than what we see in terms of Pacific communities. But nevertheless, we have this wā, we have this wā that supports the strength of our relationality to our kin, to our places of belonging, to our places of whakapapa. And there's a flow in there, right? Relationality cannot and never is just one way. It requires investment by all, and that's what upholds the kāinga. We have words like papa kāinga, pā kāinga, ahi kā, and hau kāinga. And I recall an over the cups of tea session with Professors Tom Rohr and Po Temera, and I asked them, what is hau kāinga? And they said it's the wind that blows both ways. And if you're leaving your kāinga and you're going further from your winds, make sure that you're always reciprocating back to that kāinga, because your essence is tied by those winds. So it's my contention and my supposition that in the kāinga is where we find resilience. Kāinga, we're responsible for providing the resources of marae, of pā kāinga, of people and of place. And when we look towards the future, is that something that we can, with hand on heart, say that that is still going to be possible? So kāinga, that resilience. And in our work on climate mobility, where we looked at the trends that would happen when and if Pacific people chose to move to countries, New Zealand being one. In fact, New Zealand was often a country of choice. What did that mean in terms of relationality, in terms of the kāinga? What is it that we needed to do, both as citizens of Aotearoa New Zealand, as Māori, and as policy makers, to make that transition far easier? And in that resilience, how then do the people who choose to be mobile to other countries, how do they keep and hold that essence back to the homeland? It all sounds a bit abstract, but believe you me, it was very real in the 200 pages of reports and more that got produced. And as I referred to before in some of the research we were doing, the RSC scheme, the Recognised Seasonal Employment Scheme, that we were involved in for a 10-year period, there was definitely, most definitely, that tie to the homeland. And it reminded me of a quote by Clooney Macpherson around the 1950s and the 1960s. And while I don't remember all of the quote, it was something along the lines that it's been very difficult to form pan-Pacific associations here in New Zealand. Pacific people, when they've come to New Zealand, have much more interest, commitment and investment to the homeland. And I think when we look at our own experience as Māori during those periods of urbanisation, when we were forced from our lands, how our kāinga coped. What is it when they were in a different place and in a different space that allowed them to keep those connections to tribal marae? And I guess what I see in more recent times is a bit of a tension there. How do you maintain those true whakapapa links and yet have a livelihood in places that are occupied by other hapu and iwi? And how do we nurture that wā, to keep that essence equally as strong? So a couple of scenarios that I want to talk to, and I put those questions there for you all to ponder. For kāinga in the Pacific, it's more about people. Over time, we as Māori have become more fixed to place, and I certainly think that the treaty debates, the need to justify ourselves of people, the relationship that we have with the Crown, I think that these all add into why land, why whanua, why place is so important. But if we imagine a future scenario where land is not as available, and land is not that same resource that we would always go back to be blown around by the winds of tāwhiri mātia, where then do we get our sense of belonging? We're seeing climate change occur for us now as we see unexpected and sudden disasters. They're all having a huge impact on land. And obviously, for the Pacific, this is a real everyday question. But returning to us in Aotearoa, how can we imagine a sense of belonging if we don't have that critical foundation of land? What then would that look like? It's not something I have the answer to, but it's something I'm really, really keen on exploring. I think that we take a lot for granted as well, but there's just going to be so many scenarios, environmental, political, geopolitical, And then how do we expand our resilience then, when we can't draw from that nurturing space to return to that kāinga tūturu, again blown around by the winds. Apeli Hauofa talks about the people being the mobile extensions of their physical whenua, which may or may not be fixed to a geographic space. But, he says, the mental, spiritual and emotional whenua moves with the person. We are the whenua and the whenua is us. He says that. We've seen expressions of that in many ways when we refer to our connections to mountains and to rivers. But this is at the time that we generally can have a relationship with them. When we can't, well, we have that same capacity, fortitude to pick up place and carry that with us. So these are some of the challenges I think that we will have in the future. And in terms of the second question, given that we are peoples of the Pacific, given that we are connected by the oceans, what would regional mobility at scale look like for us here in Aotearoa, New Zealand? How can we, as Māori and Pacific, take a big lead in that? How can we guide that? What is it that we need to know so that we are all mutually fitting from these relationships that we have politically, economically, socially and culturally? So what would partnership look like for us as Māori and Pacific? When the Crown is always the intervener, right? Right now we have a relationship with Pacific people that is based on the generosity of the Crown. So we're not actually brought into some of those discussions and some of that policy making. And I really think that things need to change around that. One of the other sayings that Apeli Hauofa said, that when we share concepts and we share values and we share spirituality in our belief system, those entering new lands must secure the goodwill of tangata whenua, the right to continue to live on other people's whenua. So in an Indigenous to Indigenous relationship, what would that look like? And how can we be leaders in that, rather than waiting for the Crown to orchestrate that relationship? I guess another part of this as well is to acknowledge that we are in a time where we, both Māori and Pacific, where our youthful population is continuing to increase. And our role here at this university and as educators to build that capacity of knowledge for leadership is something that I take seriously, and I know that many of my colleagues do as well. And how can we prepare our young people, give them hope for the future when they're surrounded by fake news, not sure what is AI and what isn't? Then we as educators belonging to this kāinga within the university have an incredibly important part to play. We have that opportunity to influence constructively young minds, to get them interested and inspired by all the research that we do, to bring them along on our journey, and to be able to have critical analysis, to be able to discern any situation that they come across. I want to return to my original question. I'll do that after this. This is the original question actually. Kei he te kāinga tūturu. just from some of the thinking, theorising, real-world application of some of the research that I've been doing, these are just some summary thoughts of where I think the authentic homeland is. One is that there's not one homeland anymore. We can belong in multiple places at any one time. We belong to many kāinga. For us as Māori, some by whakapapa, some of our own creation. The second bullet point, I think, is incredibly important. Our sense of belonging must be actively earned. And that means through the continuous cycles of reciprocity and investment in relationships and in others. That pāharakeke, that kāinga, it requires investment. We are collective peoples. Individuality is not part of our construct. And therefore, recognising one's truth of a fluid and expansive home or a fluid and expansive kāinga, that requires a recognition of the same in others. So if we have multiple homes, do people who come here then have multiple homes? Can they then lay claim to having a kāinga, tūturu, in Aotearoa? Should Pacific have a stronger relationship by virtue of whakapapa, by virtue of being connected? And rather than having the answer, like a true academic, when my students say, well, what do you think, Whaia? You refer them to the discourse, don't you? Really hoping that you could tell them what you really think. Especially when you teach te tiriti. And they say to me, whose side are you on? And I say, our role is to unpack the grey matter. Nothing is black, nothing is white, most of it is grey. And that's what you're going to be able to do soon, at which point they've turned off, they go, I don't know what you're talking about, Whaia. So just in closing, I want to acknowledge the kāinga of scholars that I belong to. I want to acknowledge the fact that I can have so many amazing conversations that I know nothing about until I've had a cup of tea with you, and that in that relationship over tea we have generated new knowledge. It's been a very worthwhile, inspiring and a career that I have valued. The other part of this is that I've been able to build international relationships. Where else can you go where you're paid to think, you're paid to teach, you do research that you're passionate about, and then you go and test it out on your unsuspecting students? You know, it's quite a privilege to be able to have that influence. I want to acknowledge the head of our kāinga, who through investment in te reo and tikanga Māori stands to speak te reo and is welcome to you and to me. And this is the investment that I'm talking about. And I guess the question that I'd like to leave with you in closing is what would be your investment both into your kāinga, both into the collective well-being of the collectives that you belong to, and this whole principle of ahi kā. How will we keep those fires burning to remind us of home, to remind us he kāinga tūturu kei tua, that it is within reach and just beyond. Nō reira, anō ngā mihi mai oha ki tōku nei pā. While my family is coming up to do my waiata, anō ngā mihi, kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. We're just waiting for our, you know, when we come and do lectures, we bring the guitarist and the guitar as well.
Those who know the actions to the front.